How to talk to your teenager about home ownership versus renting. Hi, I'm Tasha Danielle, founder of Financial Garden. Financial Garden YouTube channel is all about providing tips to parents like yourself on how to talk to your children, tweens, and teens about money, and providing basic financial literacy tips to adults. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to this channel and become a financial gardener by joining our newsletter. That link is also in the description box below. So let's dig into today's video topic. Talking to your teenager about home ownership versus renting. First and foremost, does your teenager know if you are renting your house, or do you own your house? Or if they really understand, if you're living in an apartment, the option of being a homeowner. Does your teenager know if you are renting or you are a homeowner? Even if you live in a house, your teenager may not understand that you are a homeowner or that you have the option to rent a house. Now, if you live in an apartment, your teenager may obviously know that you're renting and you're not a homeowner. Now, I want to just share my personal experience as growing up and as a person that grew up in an apartment. I really thought that, like, to be a homeowner, like, it took a lot of money. And it was because we grew up in apartments my whole life. And my grandmother, she had a home. She had a nice big home. But for some reason, I just felt like it was always out of reach for, like, my family. And I just never really, I don't know. I just thought the people who lived in actual houses, like, had more money than people who lived in apartments. And I didn't even realize that when I was a teenager that you could actually rent a house. I think I realized it when I was, like, in my junior or senior year, but I just assumed everybody that lived in a house actually owned it, or like they had debt to own the house. So again, like, teenagers may not actually know the difference between the two. And I know now as an adult with talking to teenagers about this, they really don't know. When I ask students, raise your hand if you know if you are living in a apartment or a home that's rented or owned. Like, obviously apartment usually in Michigan. I'm in Michigan. So if you live in an apartment, it's rented. You don't usually own the apartment. So when they live in an apartment, they say, like, yeah, I think it's renting, like, because I don't think you can own an apartment. So they raise their hand. But for students that live in a house, they don't know if their parents are renting or if they actually own the home. So for you, having this conversation with your teenagers, I really suggest that you start off with asking them, like, if they know whether you and your spouse own or rent the house that you live in. Now, if you live in an apartment, you can start off the conversation with, like, you know, we rent this apartment, and that can move into the next topic on explaining why you decided to rent or why you decide to be a homeowner. Now, remember, you don't want to overshare and scare your teenagers, right? But you want to be transparent. So for example, if you are a renter and it's because of financial reasons, you can say, like, I would love to be a homeowner, or you can say your spouse, if it's your husband or your wife, you can say, we are working on becoming homeowners, but we need to save it for a down payment, or we need to improve our credit. You can just use one of those options, or if it's something else along those lines, you can share. Don't be negative in the sense of saying, like, if you are a single parent and you say, well, I would be able to buy a house if your mom or dad didn't take all my money in the divorce. Like, we want to keep that separate. Like, if we're talking about, we want to share, things that you're working on improving if you want to become a homeowner. You may not want to become a homeowner. And if you are a homeowner, you can explain why you decided to become a homeowner. So again, you're being transparent, age-appropriate transparency with your teenager about why you are a renter or a homeowner, and if you really like the decision that you made. So that is going into the next step, which is talking about the pros and cons of each. Because there are pros and cons of being a renter and a homeowner. And it's important to have that conversation with your teenager. Leave room for questions when you're explaining the difference between home ownership and renting. Now, when you're talking about the pros and cons, some things that I share first are the pros and cons of renting. Some pros is that it's very flexible. Like if you want to continue to move around to different cities, you can. You don't have to deal with anything that's holding you to one particular spot. When you rent, when you are a renter, you don't have to pay for maintenance and repairs. Usually when you're in an apartment, you don't have to. If you're renting a house, the landlord should be making those repairs, but there are some basic repairs I know when you rent a home that is not covered that will be covered when you rent in an apartment, for an example. So that is something that is a pro, like low maintenance. You're not going to have to pay that to repair. If a furnace goes out and you're renting, that's not an expense that you have to worry about. That's on the landlord to take care of. Now, a couple cons of being a renter is that if you're living in an apartment, for example, you probably are sharing walls and they are not the thickest walls. So you have close proximity to neighbors. And if you don't like those neighbors, if they're loud, if they cook something that you don't want to smell, it usually comes through the vents and you smell it. So just the cons is just close proximity to neighbors. Like that is a con of living in an apartment, sharing those walls. Another con of living in an apartment is restrictions on what you can do as far as remodeling. Like usually you can't even paint walls. Even if you decide to paint it back when you move out, a lot of apartments have restrictions on like putting up ceiling fans or like any changes to structures or fixtures that they won't allow. And you don't really have the freedom to like decorate how you want to. That's just a con as far as decorating. Now, another con is that it's not an asset. So every month the rent is going to that landlord and it's not going to build equity, or it's not an asset. So that is a key term to explain to your teenager. Like, hey, yeah, we have these pros of being able to move whenever we want to. We don't have to pay for major repairs. But also, the rent every month is not going to anything. It's not going to us owning this property. It's going to the landlord, which means that if for whatever reason our lease is up, they can decide that we can't stay here anymore and we have to move. Like we don't own this property. And also, you can't sell it, right? So all these years you're paying rent, like 10 years of paying rent, and you want to move, you just move. You don't have to worry about selling, which can be a pro, not worrying about selling a home. But that can increase in value. You can actually get a return on your investment from being a homeowner. But when you rent, you don't have any equity, you don't own anything, you don't have an asset. You're just pretty much paying money to a landlord, and you're never going to see any benefit in the long run from paying this money. So those are the cons to share if you can't think of anything when you're explaining being a renter to your teenager. If you have any more and that I may have missed, make sure to drop them in the comments. Now, let's talk about the pros and cons of being a homeowner. First of all, it is the lack of flexibility to move. So a lot of millennials are not homeowners for this reason. The headlines say anyway. A lot of it has to do with our student loan debt, but we're not even going to tackle that. That's a whole other video. But you don't have the flexibility to really pick up and move whenever you want. Like if you're a renter, you have to deal with breaking your lease. But when you're a homeowner, you have to go through the process of selling your home if you want to move, or you have to become a landlord if you still want to own the property. So it's more of a commitment on where you're living. And like the example where I say the con is like having close proximity to neighbors when you're in an apartment. If you're a homeowner, this is like a slight, like I'm just going to jump to a con really quick. The flip side of it is if you're a homeowner and you don't like your neighbors, you're stuck there. Like usually you don't share a wall unless you own a condo, but you are kind of stuck with those neighbors. So it's like, that is one of the cons of, like, you know, you're not able to move right away. Like I was just saying, you have to sell your home. Well, also, along with that, what if you're like your neighbors and you're kind of like stuck there, right? It's not easy. Like, I'm moving out in 11 months or 10 months or whatever, and I don't have to deal with this anymore. You kind of have to figure that out, because a con is like you're not being able to move quickly. Another con of being a homeowner is the opposite of renting. Like, you have to pay for those repairs. When that furnace goes out, you need a new roof. Like, you have to figure out how to repair that, and you cannot call a maintenance man to fix it for free. Well, it's not for free because it's included in your rent when you're a renter. But like, when you are a homeowner, whenever like the toilet's not working, you have to pay someone to come out and give you an estimate. Like, that's not included in your mortgage payment. So those maintenance and repairs you're responsible for. Another con is like something that people don't think of, like home ownership. Yes, you are a homeowner, you're paying that. You don't really own it. You're paying a bank to own it in 15 or 30 years. But you're paying property taxes, and you have to make sure you're on top of going to city council meetings and understand truly what's going on with city taxes, and to make sure that there isn't like a plan to like put some development and you need to move somewhere else. That doesn't happen that often, but honestly, like when you're a homeowner, the city really has a lot of power and dictation on like what zoning means and different things. So while you have more say so than a renter, you really do have, the con is like you really do have to understand like city policies and city regulations on doing certain things as a homeowner, or if they can actually make certain decisions for you. So that's another con of being a homeowner. Now let's go to the pros. Now let's go to some pros of being a homeowner. One of those pros is you can HGTV style it any way you want to if you think about decorating. I mean, that's more money, but you really do have free reign to do whatever you want on your property as far as designing different things. You have to get city permits for certain things, but you can design it any way you want to. Another pro of owning a home is it actually is an asset. Like, meaning, another pro of being a homeowner is that you actually have an asset, meaning that you have something that you can sell and potentially have a gain on. Like, you can make money from being a homeowner and selling it after a few years because the property appreciated. You have an asset, so you can develop equity in a home. So when you're explaining this to your teenager, like, they're not going to understand again what an asset is, but this is something that is going to increase in value over time. That's the point of an asset, right? You expect for this property value to go up, and you can sell it and get a return, and you own it. And you also can, which is, I guess it's kind of a pro, when you have equity in your home, you can take the equity out to do home repairs or whatever. You can take equity out and to do whatever you want. Now, it is a loan, but it's a loan against your house, which I don't really recommend, but you do have equity. And if you're ever in a bind, binds financially, you can take equity from your home. That's something that you can't do when you're a renter. Like, some people stay at a property for 10, 20 years as a renter, and if they they are in need of cash for any reason or something, and they can't get it from their credit cards or whatever, hopefully they should have savings, but they can't pull from anything. They don't have an asset. They don't have any equity, right? And that is the biggest thing about having an asset, is that it appreciates in value, and you can take away from it if you want to in small chunks when you're a homeowner, in the form of equity, taking equity out of the home. So this is something that you want to explain with your teenager, like the pros and cons of being a homeowner and a renter. Now, lastly, I want you to do an activity with your teenager. And this activity involves you and your teenager comparing a monthly mortgage payment, an escrow mortgage payment, comparing that to a rental payment. What you want to do is you want to compare like a 3-bedroom house to a 3-bedroom apartment, or a 2-bedroom house to a 2-bedroom apartment in the same city, and see what would make more sense. And what you're doing here is you're showing like the true cost of something. Now, this is just an exercise, right? But what you want to do is you want to drive home the point that, hey, a mortgage payment, taxes, and insurance is $1,200 a month. And let's say that mortgage is about $150,000. For a $150,000 house, this is how much it would cost to make monthly payments. And let's compare that to a 3-bedroom house, a 3-bedroom apartment, or renting a 3-bedroom house per se. And let's say that payment is $1,000 a month. Now, the conversation you want to have is what makes more sense, right? And it goes back to really where a person is in their life. If they are really not ready to set roots down, or they're constantly moving and they don't have any intentions on being a landlord, then when you're doing that comparison, it could be like, well, this person may want to just pay the $1,000 a month for rent because they're going to be moving next year, because they don't know where the job's going to take them, right? But if you're just looking at a family that they want to stay in a certain area, would you want to pay $1,500 for a 3-bedroom house and own it? Or do you want to pay $1,000 a month for rent and you never own it and you don't have any equity, you don't have an asset? You can do different things to compare this, but you want to make sure that you make it comparable, right? So renting a 3-bedroom house compare it to buying a 3-bedroom house. Or you can do a rental of a high-rise or something. You can make it fun. You can mix it up. But the whole point is to have the conversation about a monthly cost compared to the road to ownership, compared to a road of non-ownership, and just kind of giving money away, in a sense, to a landlord. Let me know what you think about this activity that I'm suggesting, or this overall topic below, and I will see you on the next one. Be sure to share this video if you care. Bye.